Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, money issues dominate as General Assembly convenes. Can MCPS be saved from itself? Baltimore Sun sold to the owner of Sinclair Broadcasting. And turn out the lights. The primaries are over. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp, and Stacey Sauter, Vice Chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Welcome back. The Maryland General Assembly convened last week with headlines bemoaning the fact that there may not be enough funds to pay for the big policy ambitions of government. Mike, to steal a line from Shakespeare, double, toil and trouble. Governor Moore promises to make Maryland safer, affordable, and competitive without raising taxes. What is he, a magician? How's he going to do that?
Well, he's actually going to do what smart elected officials do, and you move money around. And so we're already seeing where higher education is taking a hit, and we're seeing where those resources are being brought out into juvenile justice and other programs. And so I expect that we're going to see, at least in the budget that the governor has put forward, it's a balanced budget. It moves a number of programs around. It reduces a number of programs. But I think that the challenge is going to be, what does the General Assembly do? Because that's the place where then everybody goes to plead their case, and will be the interesting challenge. Knowing that we can probably get through this year with a lot of things, but that the real challenge is going to be next year. And so how do they make sure that they've set themselves up going into a structural deficit, making the appropriate reductions?
Well, it's not just the operational budget, but it's the long-term capital budget. And Stacey, there was a big announcement before the session about $3.4 billion worth of transportation cuts having to be made. How does this impact Marylanders if they're going to be cutting all these road programs?
I'm rolling my eyes right now, Mike, Casey, because whenever I hear about transportation issues, the first thing I start to think about is the purple line and the boondoggle that was because of the cost overrun. So it's possible with this $3.4 billion cut, we might actually end up saving money in the long run. Who knows? And also that the state is supposed to be getting several $billion from the federal government due to the infrastructure bill. So, I wonder how much of that is going to make up the loss here.
Well, we'll see. Mike, in the District of Columbia, they just pivoted on some of their crime initiatives that had relaxed sentencing for individuals. Particularly in Maryland, juvenile justice is going to be addressed, and most Marylanders endorse an approach to being tougher on youth crime. Is that what we're going to see?
I think that seems to be a consistent message with everybody. I think one of the challenges, and we've talked about this on this show before, is I think there need to be a stiffer approach to how you address juvenile crime. At the same time, I think it's pretty clear that there's a correlation back to the mental health issues that we're seeing as well. And so how do you marry those two issues up to begin to address the mental health challenges that we're seeing across the state and across the country, and at the same time make sure that we are addressing the crime issue in a meaningful way? And I don't think it's going to be a binary, we do this or we do that. I think those programs are going to have to be brought together in an effective way, and that's going to be a challenge.
So, Stacey, this isn't really a General Assembly issue, but it's going to be an initiative on the ballot in November. Last year, the General Assembly passed the Maryland Right to Reproductive Freedom, which will change the constitutional amendment, Constitution of Maryland, from the 1992 amendment that was passed that ensured a woman's right to an abortion up to viability. This amendment seems to open the door for late-term abortions. Is this going to be a big fight?
I actually think that it will. First of all, the logic behind this is that it's easier to undo a statutory protection rather than a constitutional one. So, and I think that there are a lot of people, keep in mind that there are approximately 1 million Catholics in this area. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds because there are already protections in place.
Well, that's the whole point, is that the 1992 amendment, it was passed after Roe v. Wade to ensure a woman's right to an abortion, but they did recognize that there should be some limit on this. Already the proponents are very vocal, but I haven't seen much from anyone opposing it. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in the future.
No, and I don't think it's a bad thing to try to address this, to kind of recognize the challenges that other states are putting out there. When you look at, we have 14 states that have effectively taken abortion out of legal play whatsoever, to make sure that it's codified in the Constitution and in Maryland, to make sure that we reflect the changes that happened 30 years later. I appreciate we did in 1992, but we're in a very different landscape and a very different environment today than we were then. And while I don't think it's to open up necessarily the process for late-term abortions, I think it's really just to make sure that we have statutorily addressed the right to a woman's right to choose in a way that recognizes the political landscape in 2024.
Well, I think if you, Mike, not to disagree with you here, but I mean, if you read the text and you read the ballot question certainly says vote yes to ensure the ability to make and effectuate decisions to prevent, continue, or end one's pregnancy with no time limit. Mm-hmm. I think the clear undertone is that it's going to open up late-term abortions.
Well, I don't think that'll be the outcome. I think it's more to respond to what we're seeing in the other jurisdictions and make sure that Maryland is not going to go down that road. And I don't think that we will, but I think this will help to ensure that that's the case.
Well, we're gonna have to wait. Stacey, you have anything else on this?
Yeah, actually, I think that
we're going to move on to our next topic.
We're going down a rabbit hole with this. We've got West Virginia that doesn't allow abortions. We're going to start having, an industry here. And I think it's really sad.
Let's talk about MCPS. That seems to be the hot topic du jour. Scandal after scandal, and appears to repeat itself at all levels, particularly the higher level of the administration. Mike, I wrote this script about a week ago, and since then there have been a lot of moving parts. So is the superintendent, Monifa McKnight, is she going to be able to survive?
I think it's going to be a real challenge. And unfortunately, I think she's going to fight it. And I think that she's probably within her rights to do so. But I think it's going to make we're in a very challenging time for MCPS as a result of coming out of pandemic and seeing the reduction in test scores that we've seen, and then just the actual challenges we have with what we've seen with the sexual harassment issues. And so I think when you look at all those pieces, to add this on top of that just makes things even more challenging. And we're focusing on all of the extracurriculars and not actually how do we educate our children better. And I think this is just one more distraction. I think it's gonna be hard for her to withstand it, but I think it's just we're turning our attention away from where our attention needs to be, which is how do we make our kids do better in school? Well,
Adam Pagnucco posed a very interesting question yesterday. It's, he analyzed the law and who has the right to fire the superintendent. And basically no one has the right to fire the superintendent, but the county council does have the right, maybe you can correct me, Mike, but the county council does have the right to fire the school board.
The county council has the right to fire the school board, individual school board members, but I disagree. I think that the Board of Education has the right to remove the superintendent, but they actually have to make sure that they've documented appropriately to do it. And while it's difficult for us on the outside looking in to see where they're addressing a personnel matter, at least the way it's been portrayed, it doesn't appear as though the Board of Education is necessarily taking those steps for the appropriate documentation for that removal to occur, which is where this is going to become really interesting.
Stacey, what was I admit that the Mike is probably correct on that I missed that point. What is your view on all of this?
Well, the short answer is yes, I think that she should resign. Do I think that she will? No, not immediately. And a few of the reasons why, as I see it, is that you've got this monolithic MCPS. They're not used to playing defense, but they are now. And if she resigns, then it's the practical equivalent of her taking full responsibility for what happened. The county can then wash its hands of the problem and move on, saying that it was her fault. Also, we don't know what's in her contract. And so what kind of protection she has if she's forced to resign, or rather if her contract is just up, she likely stands to benefit monetarily by hanging in there and forcing their hand. When I read how Khalid Walker, the Department of Compliance and Investigation Coordinator, how badly he was railroaded by the cabal of sycophants surrounding Monifa McKnight, I felt like they were operating with utter moral turpitude. I think she needs to go, they need to go, and so does the entire school board.
Well, but let's return to Mike's question, which is how do we educate our children better?
Well, I mean, I think we haven't had a vision for where we want to move our education in Montgomery County forward in many, many years. And so while we can point to the superintendent, who obviously the superintendent plays a role in this, the Board of Education plays a role in this, and quite honestly, so does the county executive and the county council. I mean, where are we trying to go? There was a time when we used to have actually clarity because the county council, the county executive, the superintendent, the Board of Education actually sat down and had a discussion as to what were the key priorities, where the funding needed to go, why we're going to measure the outcomes, and what objectives were we seeking to achieve. We probably haven't done that in 15 years. And as a result, we don't have a clear path, and no one's really talking about how we get there from here, and we're kind of mired in the muck.
Well, I'm going to let you have the last word on this, Mike. We're going to go on we need to take a break. When we come back from this short break, Trump won Iowa, Trump won New Hampshire. Is it time to fold up the tent? And would employees of the Baltimore Sun rather be unemployed than work for Sinclair Broadcasting? Stay tuned.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign, not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet,
We discover
they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
And welcome back. Since 1837, think about it, 1837, the Baltimore Sun has been the leading newspaper in the state of Maryland. But beginning in 1986, the Sun has been sold several times to different media companies. And finally, it was purchased out of bankruptcy by a hedge fund, Alden Global Capital, in May of 2021. Mike, it was announced this week that the Sun and the Capital Gazette newspapers were being purchased by David D. Smith, the head of Sinclair Media Group, which is located in Hunt Valley outside of Baltimore. So we have a local guy buying it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think we know yet. I think it could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think one of the things that has been positive about some of the stuff that he's done, especially through Sinclair in Baltimore, has been some of the investigative journalism that they've undertaken. And so I think if that's an approach that they take, it could be very positive. It's also been very conservative. And does this tie into where Sinclair kind of has gone with their broadcasting, which I'm not necessarily sure is reflective of where the city of Baltimore is kind of from on a broader ideological perspective and just from a straight journalism perspective. And that could be a bad thing if he kind of goes in that direction. And so I think that at this point, it's a bit of a wait and see scenario. There's some potential positives and some potential negatives, and we're going to have to go. On the plus side, there's still a Baltimore Sun. So I think that's one positive element that we should look at, is it because it has been a challenge and it's been difficult for local newspapers to make a go of it, and it's still here. And so there's an opportunity for there to still be a media market in Baltimore.
Well, I'm a subscriber to the Baltimore Sun online because they do have great stories, particularly covering the General Assembly and others. Stacey, while not owned technically by Sinclair Media, won't the sale of the Sun allow it to be partnered with Sinclair's television station, Fox 45, which has won a few awards recently?
I think that's very possible that you're going to see that cross-pollination there because they're likely going to be covering some of the same stories. Listen, I have a master's in journalism. I worked in broadcasting for many years. I was a TV reporter for a little while. And so I love journalism. I'm a journalism junkie. I'm a news junkie. And so I understand a little bit of Sinclair's message or David Smith's message in saying that he just felt like the reporting in the Baltimore Sun was very lopsided. I too, at least until recently, I was a subscriber. I get the digital format. And I found that in like their local news, that tended to be the case. I felt like that it was very lopsided reporting, and they do have some good stories about what's going on up in the legislature. But overall, I think that this might be good for competition.
Well, what's interesting, the LA Times recently just announced a layoff of 20% of their staff. So newspapers are taking a big hit, and unless they are able to pivot to a tech-friendly format that spurs people to eyeball it, it's going to be a challenge.
Well, as I mentioned to you a little while ago, Casey, one of the things that we saw, and this is the risk, and that is that with the digital format of the newspaper, if the content becomes much more heavily invested with video from the broadcasting station from Fox 45, then it could end up diluting the effect of what the current newspaper is, and they may end up losing readership over that.
No, I think it's a real challenge, just readership in general. We've gotten to so many formats now that people just view video. And so I think it's just difficult for people to read long formats, which I think is where you actually get good information. And so I'm curious to see how this plays out just in media in general. But I am hopeful for the Baltimore Sun, and I hope that this is a constructive relationship.
Well, I'm not a subscriber to the New York Times, but I do know that the New York Times reinvented itself a few years ago and is more profitable by incorporating, obviously, a paywall, which already exists for the Sun, but also incorporating news stories that were more media friendly rather than strictly a print format. So I think we're going to have to wait and see. I know there's a big hullabaloo by the staff. They're very afraid of the editorial direction of the Baltimore Sun. I think people want straight journalism. I think they're tired of, the optics of, one side versus the other. Now, newspapers have already leaned one way or the other, but, maybe it's time to have more of a balanced approach.
But I think it's hard, and I think you're right. I mean, I think we kind of live in the echo chamber now, and most people only need to get the news that they want to see on the issues that they want to hear. And I think it's difficult to find a place where you can get that. Just tell me this. I need to know the story, and I'd like to understand the context that the story is being told in, and I can make a decision from there. But those opportunities don't exist that much anymore.
Stacey, what's very, very interesting. Let me pose this question. Both the Baltimore Sun prides itself on being a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper, and Fox 45 has won investigative reports or awards for its investigative journalism. If they combine the two, will it be successful?
Well, to Mike's point, I think we're going to have to wait and see how that goes. And I hope that they fine tune it along the way if they find out that it's not working, just for the sake of preserving the newspaper. But I also agree with Mike's point that we need, no matter what, that it's really important to be getting the facts so that the readers or the viewers can make their own informed decisions. And if you've got the too right-leaning or too left-leaning, then you're not getting that. And we have an uninformed electorate as a result of it.
Well, we're gonna have to see what happens as the newspaper addresses and makes some editorial changes. Let's talk about what's really fun, what everybody really cares about: the presidential election. The path to the November presidential election at this point is all but settled. President Joe Biden has no real opposition in Congressman Dean Phillips, and as of today, in the aftermath of the New Hampshire Republican primary, it's doubtful that Nikki Haley is a viable opponent to challenge the former 45th president. Stacey, Joe McQuaid, the former longtime publisher of the Union Leader, said this recently about President Trump. He has no business being president of the United States. He's a dangerous man, and he has a lot of sycophants. That's obviously the feeling of a lot of people who oppose Trump. What do you have to say?
Well, I'm stating the obvious when I say Trump has the power because of his present momentum. That said, I'm not speaking for or against him when I say anything and everything can happen in politics, and it does, which is also why DeSantis and Ramaswamy have both suspended their campaigns. According to the FEC, that means it's technically not terminated, and the candidates therefore can keep raising money, hire consultants, etc., and who knows, resurrect their candidacies if anything goes off the rails. But Casey, I think that there's a far bigger issue that needs examination which is out of a combined population of 4.6 million people in New Hampshire and Iowa, only 434,000 voters in these two states have essentially determined the trajectory of one of the most consequential presidential elections of our time. So is it possible the outcome was determined in part because the two leading candidates skipped out on the debates? I mean, I believe it should be mandatory for all presidential candidates to participate in both the primary and general election debates. They are a real crucible for candidates and offer the voters and the media an opportunity to see who has the medal or a meltdown, under fire. So I really wish the DNC and the RNC would not allow the candidates to make unilateral decisions about their willingness to participate. It's a big problem and will only become more entrenched if it's not appropriately addressed.
Mike, I believe it was Will Rogers who said that he's not a member of any organized political party. He was a Democrat. Why is it that there aren't any other candidates? I mean, my goodness, if you recall 92, there were tons of candidates who wanted to run against George Bush, even though he had a high popularity rate, and Bill Clinton emerged and won the nomination. Why is it that no one is challenging an 81-year-old president? I'm sorry. Both these guys are too old to be running.
Well, I agree with that completely. But I think historically, we don't typically have people running against incumbents. And so the incumbent has the luxury. And one of the other really interesting challenges is, and I didn't fully appreciate this, I've been doing some reading lately, where it really is drawing sides where people are now more angry with the opposing party than they are positive about their own party. And so as a result, I think it's really hard to have people pick a candidate that they don't think is battle tested. And so at least Biden has beaten Trump. And so is that good? No, because they're both nearly 80 years old. But I think you have a candidate that you show that has already won and can continue to win. But I agree with Stacey. I think there are a lot of twists and turns yet to come in this. And I don't know that we necessarily, and we've said this here before, that the two likely candidates ultimately are the two candidates that we're selecting from.
My political prognostication is just gone in the dumper. I mean, in 2016, I was a Cruz guy, and this year I was a DeSantis guy, and thought that we had, younger, more qualified candidates needed to run. Stacey, you mentioned that it's too bad that the voters don't have a chance to vote on this. Any further thoughts?
Listen, I can't underscore that enough. And I think that we're seeing a high level of frustration out there. I see it in my political dealings on a daily basis and what I hear from people. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Haley, if she can hang in there long enough. Again, I'm saying this, I'm not endorsing any particular candidate here. I'm just strictly looking at the sort of the technical aspects of this and just wondering, is she going to have the money? Is she going to have the votes or whatever it takes to hang in there and create a real fight? Time will tell. And also whether or not Trump actually gets convicted of anything.
All right. Well, we only have about 30 seconds left, Mike. Go ahead. You finish up.
No, I think it's good for their, I can't believe that people are calling for her to step out after two primaries. To your point, typically there are a number of folks who are in there and are going to be in there for at least a few primaries to kind of see how this plays out. And I think it's been very interesting to see Trump's reaction to the fact that she's still in. He's clearly very frustrated by that. And how does that manifest itself over the coming primaries? And if, to Stacey's point, if she can continue to have some resources, I think it makes it very interesting to see how this plays out.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. And, there's a new rumor du jour going around that Biden is going to drop out of the race in either late May or early June, and Michelle Obama is going to be nominated at your convention. So we have to wait and see.
That'd be fabulous.
It's all part of the mystery. Stay tuned for Party Shot.
Didn't I say anything and everything can happen? And it does.
It will.
Stay tuned for Party Shots.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight, both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back, because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Welcome back. Now with Party Shots, Mike Knapp.
Thank you, Casey. We actually had snow unusually for the first time in 2 years, and it was measurable and significant. And oftentimes when that happens, one of the first things people do is get concerned about when their roads are going to be plowed. And I just want to have a shout out to those folks who actually do that plowing, because it's a very thankless and a very challenging job, and they're goes very much unrecognized. So I just want to say thanks to those folks who are out there making sure that we could get around during the monster snowstorm that we had.
Terrific. Stacey Sauter, your parting shot.
Well, Casey, I would be remiss if I didn't underline that I'm the vice chairman of the MCGOP, and we're quite active. We have a lot of great stuff going on here in Montgomery County. We have a Lunar New Year event coming up on February 13th. If anybody's interested in attending this event, they should go to mcgop.com.
Great. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you both for appearing, but I want to also shout out to our good friend, Nancy Florine, who had knee surgery yesterday. I hope she has a speedy and complete recovery. And thank you, audience, for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.